I also made the case for owning Bitcoin, the quintessence of scarcity premium. It's literally the only large tradable asset in the world that has a known fixed maximum supply. By its design, the total quantity of Bitcoins cannot exceed 21 million.
Bitcoin is the hardest money that has ever been invented.
If you don't have my private key, you cannot spend my Bitcoin, period. And this is the power of Bitcoin.
It's the first time we figured out how to create true property that you can take possession of with full custodial rights.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? And welcome to another episode of Talking in Bits, where we walk you through Bitcoin bit by bit so we can provide you with the information you need to succeed and persist. Back with another episode, and this is going to be one of my favorite episodes, I can tell already. Co-founder of Unchained, Dhruv Bansal in the house. How you doing, good sir?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me on, Jose.
Oh, thank you. I know it's very early. I know we try to get this scheduled a few times, and seems like the gods were against us, but here we are.
Okay.
We're going to make it happen. So just to kind of get into it a little bit, and this is something I've actually always been curious. I don't know why I haven't even asked you this, but I ask pretty much all my guests, and it's your Bitcoin origin. Sometimes it's something you read. Sometimes it's a life event. Sometimes it's a mixture of the two. How did you get into Bitcoin, Dhruv?
Yeah. So I'll say it was definitely from more the side of technology and like computers that drew me in. I did not have a lot of money for most of my life, and I did not know anything about money. Therefore, I wasn't very curious about it. I had never asked the question like, how does this stuff get made or created, or how much of it is there, or who controls it? I was pretty ignorant about all that stuff. So actually, this is not answering your question at all, but one of the things I've really enjoyed about building Unchained and working with all the people here is I've learned so much about money in the last few years, to the point where I now feel like I know more about it than most people, which is, I think everyone's got their strengths and weaknesses, right? About like what they bring to Bitcoin. But money was definitely not one of mine. It was computers. And that's because prior to starting Unchained, Joe's my co-founder and our CEO here, Joe and I started a tech company called InfoChimps right here in Austin. And, we were both pretty young. I was in grad school at the time. It was a cloud computing and distributed computing, like big data, this kind of that was what was in the air at the time. And I think we timed it really well. We got really good at that technology. We had some pretty ambitious goals around data marketplaces and stuff like this, but we ultimately found success just helping businesses deal with the huge amounts of data that they generate, analyzing it, trying to find business value in it, kind of bringing software, platform, methodology, expertise. So it was a data company.
Yeah.
So I was like getting pretty good at distributed systems and distributed databases. And I understood a lot of the challenges of when systems scale, like they have to scale out. And then that's just a whole new world from programming, in a one large machine type environment. So I was familiar with these notions of like consensus and distributed consensus and eventual consensus and all these kinds of ideas. But again, wasn't thinking at all about money, didn't have any. Met a guy at an open source O'Reilly conference, I believe, in Portland. And he was just such a fascinating character. I've told the story before, but it's I still haven't found this person. He was wearing a kilt, which is just a thing that he does, I guess, this person at this conference. Yeah. Super intelligent, mathematician or something like this, like pretty technical person. And then just really interested in Bitcoin and just chatting me up about it, like explaining it to me, how it worked, answered all my questions. And I had enough of a background in distributed systems and just how they work, the time to sort of appreciate it. And I was like, oh, this is actually interesting. Sure. It's like an interesting kind of thing. I acknowledged how proof of work could be used to, create consensus in Bitcoin. I understood that part. Pretty much right away that evening over drinks, Yeah. What I did not understand is why anyone would find Bitcoin valuable, right? Yeah. Like obviously, I think we all know Bitcoin doesn't work unless people are motivated to mine Bitcoin to earn Bitcoin. Like that idea, while I understood that it was theoretically possible, I think there's a lot of business ideas that theoretically are possible if all of us did a thing, but all of us aren't going to do that thing. Right. And so that business is not a good idea, or that project's not good. People are always like, I'm going to start a social network and it's going to be awesome. And like, okay, man, like call me when you get to 100 million users and then we'll talk, about like whether it's successful or not. It's like a lot of things could work in theory if everyone was there in the platform, in the venue, using it. But how do you get them to do that, right? So I I did not understand money, so I didn't really understand the value proposition of uncensorable, finite supply, like that. All that was like totally lost on me.
Sure.
So I was like, this is a really cool technical solution to a problem that like no one has. So thanks, bro, for telling me about this. Great conference convo, and I'll just file this way in the back of my mind and not think about it for years. So basically, I totally dismissed it.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like everyone, you should dismiss Bitcoin the first time you hear about it.
So?
Like you shouldn't be like, oh yeah, I'll buy some. It's like you should be pretty suspicious and skeptical of such a thing can exist. Like, what even is it? Like, do we even understand it? Like, are you lying to me? Are you a scammer? I feel like I certainly had a lot of those reactions too, and I was like, and in programming, there's this idea of like esoteric programming languages or like useless programming languages or like programming languages you build just to prove that you can build them. They're like Rube Goldberg machines and you would never actually use them. They're just fascinating to try to build and use. Brainfuck is a example of this. Like if you Google brainfuck programming, you'll find like it looks like noise, but
really? People
write programs in it, and it's a fun challenge.
Is it like a flex? Like just kind of show off your skills and your prowess?
I think I've never written a brainfuck program. I've barely tried to read one.
Yeah.
But it is. Yeah. It's a little bit about skills. It's a little bit about like working within constraints. That's something we can come back to and talk about. I think constraints are really powerful. But like, when a programming language makes something really, really stupidly hard on purpose, it's kind of cool that you can like get it to do anything at all.
Yeah.
Right. So I had this like vibe about Bitcoin. I was like, this is so complicated and like, it's kind of cool that it works, but like it doesn't do anything useful. And so I completely ignored it for 2 years. This was around like 2011.
Okay.
So then a few years later, Joe and I, we sold our business. I had some money for the first time in my life. And I was like, I bought some dumb shit. And one of the things I wound up buying was Bitcoin, and not for really particularly good reasons. I wasn't like smart about it yet. But I did check in on it, and the price in 2011 was like $1 or $1.
Yeah.
And by 2013, it's like $100. And I'm like, wow, how did that happen? Like in 2 years, this thing went 100x.
That's crazy.
Like, yeah, I know. And I was like, who is using this? I was like, oh God, people are using it. If people are using it, that means it might actually work. I should get some. It's like, cat meme, I should buy some Bitcoin. It's like, and I didn't really have a thesis around it or anything like that. I was just like, I had money for the first time and I was like, oh, it's going up. I'll buy it. I'm a smart investor. I sold a company, therefore I can invest money well or something. You have these ideas. Let's say most of my investments that I made in that era did not pan out. But Bitcoin, of course, did, right? So I bought a little bit of Bitcoin. I wish I had bought more, of course, but like, at least I was prudent. I was like, well, I don't know what this is. So I'll buy like a tiny amount and just kind of, if it was a dumb investment, whatever, I lost my money.
Yeah.
I was approaching it like maybe the way you might approach angel investing or something like that, where you just make a bunch of small plays and, if most of them might not work out, that's okay. One will work out. And actually that did, of course, turn out to be the case because having bought Bitcoin in 2013, I've held it pretty much since then and never sold any.
Amazing.
Just kind of watched it. Again, wish I had bought more. But the reason I bought in 2013 was just price speculation.
Yeah.
And then again, I put it away because, of course, the price collapsed immediately, right? As soon as I bought it, like the price went down. I was like, oh, great. I think it went up first and then it went down. Yeah, it went up just enough to make me feel like I was smart and then it went down.
Yeah,
right?
gotcha.
So I started telling people how smart I am. I bought Bitcoin and then it went down.
That's how it works usually.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I didn't really think about it for a few years. I was working for my acquirer at the time, and it took Joe and I a year or two to kind of disentangle from the company that purchased our business, and it took some time off, like built a house, like got married. Well, actually got engaged. Didn't get married for years after that. But just some life stuff. I think needed some time to decompress. Needed some time to not think about programming and businesses. I just needed some time. I knew Joe and I knew we wanted to build another business together. Like we're really good friends, and we complement each other's skills, and we enjoyed overall the painful journey of building a business the first time.
Yeah.
So we were like, we got to go do that again. But I'm really glad, actually, I'm proud of us for not just like running from one thing into another. I'm glad we took that like couple years off to like figure out what we really wanted to do and pick the right opportunity. Because sure enough, right around 2015, 16, we're starting to get serious again about like, okay, what's our next business?
Yep.
And at this point, we were sort of known, in as much as we were known by anyone, we were sort of known as data guys. We built this data, cloud computing, technical business.
Yeah.
We were getting offers, conversations with investors and businesses to, come in and run this database thing, or maybe start up a data thing of your own again. It was attractive as an idea because I felt like I was good at it and I could see the future of how that could work out. I could, correct a lot of my own mistakes that I didn't do well in the first business, and probably get an investment for it. But I think what Joe and I both experienced was, we're pretty hungry guys when it comes to like learning and self-improvement. And I think we were kind of burned out on just like rolling another data project. Not that it isn't important, or where we couldn't have been successful perhaps, but it felt like we wanted to learn new stuff. And I was just finally getting into like the rabbit hole of Bitcoin at that point. Like having now owned it for a few years, when it went down, I sort of assumed it would die, and it like didn't die, obviously. And actually,
Did it?
and it started to come back a little bit. And I'm like, what is this thing? So you start, and now I think 2015 or so is when I actually started to like read about it.
Okay.
And like try to think to myself, well, how does it actually work? Because I didn't actually know. Like as much as I said like proof of work and all this, like I didn't understand how UTXOs were structured, or like what Bitcoin transactions really look like under the hood, or various attack models against proof of work or consensus. I was very much like, Bitcoin might be Friendster or it might be Facebook, who knows? Like that's a very 2015 analogy to offer. So I was not like a Bitcoiner by any means, and I wasn't like convinced about it, but I was getting super curious. And like I already had some, it was sitting at Coinbase.
Yep.
And I think in that year and a half, like I really just kind of fell in love with it. Like I think as a lot of us have experienced of like all the things I thought to criticize, I was like, have been thought about, and or my criticism was wrong, and or people are working on it. And everything I thought was like a problem, like it's not expressive enough. You can't program well inside of it, like you might be able to in something like an Ethereum. Proof of work bad for the environment. Just every criticism or immediate bad idea or thing I would say was bad about it. After I did some reading, I was like, actually maybe I'm wrong, or maybe this is not a problem actually, or actually it's a strength. And I need to view it this way, and like I need to recontextualize like what's even the problem being solved here. And it was a huge period of learning for me. I think like a lot of people who've gone through that experience.
It's interesting. So that FUD was still around at that time, like waste of energy, all that same FUD.
It's the same FUD, dude. It's all the same.
It's just
FUD.
a cycle of the
It's just
FUD?
a cycle of the FUD. And
Yeah,
I feel like
interesting.
there are guys like me who like did that cycle in 2011 through 13, and there are guys that did it in 2017 to 19. There are guys doing it now.
Oh, okay.
It's like we're all going through that same experience. Just different cohorts.
Now, what about resources? Like, I mean, I think we take it for granted nowadays. We have folks such as yourself, as writers such as yourself, and the Parker Lewises of the world. Sailors, you name it, go across that board. What were the resources like in 2015? I mean, was it just as vast? Were you able to just go online and just start reading about Bitcoin and kind of bouncing your misconceptions against it, or was it just harder to dig, like a Reddit type thing?
It definitely was harder than it is now.
Okay.
Like for sure. Also, I feel like I was still coming at it from like a very much a computers and data and blockchain and technology and crypto perspective. I hadn't really like in 2015, 16 really figured out that the money part was really the most important part. So I wasn't reading about like the economic case for a finite supply of coins or anything like that. I had like very few opinions around that. I was mostly reading about like how the hell does Bitcoin work like as code, right? Because I'm a programmer, so I'm like, I need to run it. I wanted to like analyze, because I'm a data guy, right? So I wanted to like analyze the underlying data set of Bitcoin. And something that like I've become sort of well associated with is this Hodl waves chart idea.
Yeah.
Not something I created, by the way. Something that was created by John Ratcliffe on Twitter. So I found his version of it on Reddit, actually. I found his original Reddit post where he had done it. He had done the Hodl waves from like the Genesis block to like, I don't hit that.
Oh, you're good.
I found John's blog post on Reddit or his Reddit post where he had done the Hodl wave analysis from like 2009-ish Genesis block to sometime in 2011 or something like that. And it was super interesting. And I was like, wow, I wish this continued.
Yeah.
And of course, because it was 2015, 16, like you couldn't just Google, give me the Hodl waves. And, that was not a thing. So I had to figure out how to make that myself. And that required, figuring out how to like parse the data in the blockchain and look at the mempool and historically and UTXOs at least. And, and like, what are the tools that are even available for that? Like, I'm just writing C code at this point, digging into the data structures, like found some cool stuff from Rusty Russell, who wrote a cool Bitcoin D data tool, and so just putting it together. And we didn't publish the Hodl wave stuff until a few years later, but right around 2015, 16, Joe and I made the first version of that chart. Like we looked at it, and Joe actually named them Hodl waves, which I think is like 90% of the success of that chart. Exactly. It's a good name.
It is.
And so like, I think we saw that chart, like, and we were like, dude, like people are holding their coins, like we could see on the blockchain that 60% of coins were more than a year old.
Yeah.
Already that idea of like X number of coins more than Y old was an interesting idea.
Yeah.
And that really drove our theses around if we were going to build Unchained, like what would Unchained do?
Yeah.
And we were looking at it, was like, well, the majority, maybe not the average Bitcoin user, but the average Bitcoin is just sitting there doing nothing.
Right.
So like, how can this be the world's money if it's so unproductive? And what value might a person who's intending on sitting on Bitcoin for years get out of it in the meantime? Like we already at that point had each owned Bitcoin for a number of years and we weren't doing anything with it. It was just sitting, on our Coinbase account. And I think we were in the middle of figuring out how to move it to like hardware wallets. But like, we understood that our Bitcoin was part of that cohort, right? And we weren't really getting anything out of it, quote unquote, couldn't use it for anything. So this idea of building a business that targeted not like traders constantly moving in and out of Bitcoin or people who are getting into Bitcoin for the first time or anything, but folks who already have Bitcoin and who are starting to feel about it the way that we were starting to feel about it at the time, which is like, hey, this might be actually one of the most interesting parts of my portfolio. And then of course, by 2017, 18, the price had, skyrocketed to 20K and subsequently collapsed. So I think we did not expect that. We expected when we were thinking about Unchained in 2015, 16, we were like, if you go back to our slide decks, it's so funny. Bitcoin's like $6 billion market cap or $8 billion market cap total, like the numbers are all so much smaller, but you can see us trying to justify like why we felt there was a business here, right? In catering to long-term Bitcoin holders. But yeah, it was looking at that early version of the Hodl waves chart that really cemented Joe and I's belief that like there was some valuable business that we could build here.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we took the time to sit there, researching and playing around with ideas because I feel like I would really regret if in 2015 and 16, Joe and I started some other kind of business, like any other kind of business, even if it had been successful.
Right.
Just because, this journey that we've all been on, you included, has been like the most exciting period of my life professionally, for sure. Like the amount of learning, the opportunities that I feel are coming through here at Unchained, it's really, really cool and compelling. And I feel like really proud that I get to be part of this, that I get to be surrounded by folks like yourself, Parker, Will, like a lot of the employees and staff and friends and investors that we've built around us at Unchained. It's really cool.
It's magical, yeah. If I just go back for a second here, so it seemed like Unchained, the idea was already being discussed, but you guys were still in the process of moving your Bitcoin off of Coinbase. So when did multi-signature become like a piece of that aha moment?
So I think what had happened is we had independently around 2015 or so, 16-ish, we both figured out that like, this Coinbase thing is like probably not a safe long-term place to store. Like Mt. Gox had happened, Bitfinex I think was brewing. And moreover, like Trezor and Ledger, like Coldcard wasn't really on the scene at that time. And there were other providers too, but like these companies like seemed legit, like in a way that like maybe in 2013, they didn't, or I just wasn't aware of them as much when I first got my coins. And so we started just as Bitcoin owners, we just like moved our stuff to Trezor. Like we both just like figured it out together, kind of like understood how it all worked. That was a real trippy thing too for me, because what I couldn't understand when I first got the Trezor, this is so dumb to say out loud for a person in my position at this point, but I was like, I got the Trezor, I got the words, like writing all that stuff down. And I was like, but when do I have to create an account at Trezor.com? Like, surely that's part of this. Otherwise, how will you know what Bitcoin I have? Like, surely I have to tell you who I am. And it took me a long time to figure out like, no, wait a minute. This is a deterministic wallet. Like it just calculates the addresses fresh every time and looks up balances live. And I was like, that is fucking magical.
Yeah, it is.
Like, that is so cool. Like I don't even need an account with you guys. That's amazing. So moments like that really got me excited too about like the change in technology that Bitcoin could actually create, kind of be like the killer app for. But coming out to multisig, right? So we had already sort of gotten onto cold storage as individual, just Bitcoin owners. And then when we were starting to build Unchained, so we had kind of zoned in right on this idea of long-term Bitcoin owners as being a valuable market. We had started to zone in on lending. We had asked a lot of Bitcoin owners that we knew. Like we were lucky enough to meet some really famous and early Bitcoin owners. I'm actually wearing the T-shirt of someone that we spoke with early, Dustin Trammell, who's a friend and investor now, and really helped us understand where his position was, like the kinds of products he would be interested in. Like obviously you couldn't ask for a more long-term holder than Dustin at that point. Yeah. And And like the idea emerged that like lending was interesting, that like maybe we could, like a home equity line of credit, that was always the analogy we had in our head. It's like, hey, you have this house, you have real estate, you can get value out of the real estate without having to sell it. Like if buy and sell doesn't have to be the only possible financial interaction here. There are many other options. So we sort of zoned in on that as like, and especially with Bitcoin, right? You don't want to sell, right? We could see in the Hodl waves, like 60% of people are sitting here through this crazy price downturn.
Yeah.
So like, if you don't want to sell, what else can you do with it, right? So lending started to become interesting. And then that, of course, led to the idea of collateralizing Bitcoin. And then that led to, well, no one's going to trust us. I laugh because I did not anticipate ICOs or NFTs or like the rise of how big places like Coinbase and other delegated custodians kind of became. I just assumed that everyone would be super paranoid and no one would ever trust us. Like how could they possibly? Not your keys, not your coin, right?
Right.
I'm glad I had that bias. I feel like because the entrepreneurial approach would be like, just try it, man. Like just ask someone if they'll give you their Bitcoins, without further deep consideration in exchange for a loan. Just don't worry about the custody part until that becomes a problem, right?
Right.
But we were like, no, it will be a problem. Like no one will do this. Like we were wrong, but in a way right, I think. So we thought up front of like, how are we going to make this safe? How are we going to make it so that you as the borrower, because I forgot to mention this, but Unchained now I think is known for our vaults and our loans and our financial services, but the first one was loans. And so this is like when we're thinking about the loan product way back in 2015, 16. And the idea was, how can we make it so obvious to the borrower that we're not absconding with this collateral? Right? Like if your whole point of borrowing against your Bitcoin was so that you wouldn't have to sell it, the worst thing that could happen was we somehow lose it, or we get hacked, or we rehypothecate it and it's gone, like the South Park, meme. It's like, how can we convince you that that's not going to happen here, right? That was a big thing in our minds. And then number two, I think Bitfinex had already occurred. And so the Bitfinex hack, and of course Mt. Gox and many things like that. And so we were like, really, we also got to consider ourselves. Like, how can we were just 3 or 4 people at the time. But it was like, how are we going to make sure that none of us like can screw the others over? And it wasn't because we thought we were going to screw each other over, right? But it's one of those, if you create a system where no one can screw the other person over, then you don't have to ask the question.
Good point.
Right? Like if you make it so that like, well, we'll just make Joe the CEO, like have the keys to the castle and we'll just trust Joe that nothing bad ever happens with them. Even if Joe didn't do it, if something bad were to happen, it's going to be like, Joe, what'd you do?
Right.
Like, so we wanted to build a system that even early on would require at least, would minimally require at least collusion between internal actors in order to be able to move coins or spend them or anything like that. And so Multisig, which was not even close to as common as it is today and not nearly as easy and all that, was something we immediately reached for. There weren't a lot of tools that would allow you to build multi-sig wallets. Electrum was something we originally leaned on quite hard when we were sort of templating out and figuring out how our business would run. But yeah, it was obvious to us. It was the idea that like, well, multi-sig is the solution, in particular cold storage multi-sig, because it protects us against ourselves. We can have multiple keys and we can federate control and access to those amongst our small team and our growing team. And clients, if we use an on-chain model, like with multi-sig literally on the blockchain, they can just look at the address. They just know from a blockchain explorer or their own node or whatever that like the funds that they contributed are still sitting there. Like we wouldn't move them. And so they would know that they're not being rehypothecated. And that so this is we started here. And again, I laugh at myself because so many people wouldn't have done either of those things. They would have just assumed that like, maybe I can get people to trust me, and if I can, it's cheaper, so let's start there. But I'm glad we started there because I think even though it probably in retrospect slowed down our business quite a lot, we had to go build all this stuff. That took forever. It served, as you know, as the basis for everything that came after it. Like our vaulting product became an extension of that original multi-sig construction. We actually, I think, first launched multi-institution lending, so collaborative custody for loans instead of just us having all the multi-sig keys. And then we launched the collaborative custody vault model. And then we've continued to build on that, right? Like with trading and IRA and other products that Unchained has launched, and we're going to continue to build on it. So I'm actually very happy that I forced myself to like really think about these constraints and try to build the right product. It was, I think, the wrong product for the time in a way, because it took a few years to really take off. But like at this point, I'm convinced that Unchained's product decisions in those early days are a big part of why people find us valuable today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you actually won up the mortgage equity example, because in that example, you got to trust the bank.
True, true.
So
Yeah.
like you were saying, if you would have just went with that model, which is like, oh, let's just ask them, you would have eventually blown up at some point, or something would have went wrong. That would have been weird. So
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
Like maybe this comes back to that notion of constraints. Like I won't defend bad decisions and unethical behavior, but I understand how people are led to those places,
sure.
right? Like on some level, it's your business, you have employees, you have obligations. When you have a tool and the tool can save you, a lot of people will reach for the tool,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, if all I got to do in order to keep the business alive another 6 months is just move some of this money from clients over here into this other bucket, and probably like 1% chance something will go wrong, like a lot of people take that. They'll do that.
They'll do that. Yeah.
But they don't realize that it's not really 1%. It's like it's a 1% chance correlated up with every other participant in the market to the point where it becomes like a near certainty
Yeah.
that over some amount of time, these kinds of this kind of Wild West lack of accountability model will fuck you over.
Right.
So I have a lot of empathy for businesses that have been through struggles this year, because I know that I try to use all the tools that I can. I'm just constrained. I can, like, our business can never raid our clients' vault deposits to go pay for some financial bad decisions we made. We just can't. It's impossible for us to do that.
Yeah.
And so it's never come up, and I'm glad that it's never come up, because I'd like to believe I'm a moral, upstanding, ethical person. But, sometimes in those dark moments when you're like, well, either my giant business that I built fails, or I take this tiny risk with client deposits, I can see myself
Yeah.
in those moments failing to be moral.
Yeah.
And making a bad choice, thinking that I'll get away with it. And then you don't. And then your business tanks and your reputation tanks, and
Yeah.
all because of those moments of weakness. So in a sense, I'm really happy I don't have to be strong in that way. Or maybe I was smart about my own worries around this and just built a system that I knew that I couldn't even ruin, right?
Right.
It's like, you got to wake up in the morning, you take the alarm clock, you put it across the room kind of thing, because in the morning you're just going to hit snooze. It's like you kind of you got to combat your own worst tendencies.
Good point. Yeah.
And so I feel like I just said I'm an immoral person somehow.
No,
in the last 2 minutes.
I think what you said is the truth, which is what everybody battles with, right? Everybody,
Yeah.
convenience and the easy decision versus the difficult one, or in this situation, the one where you've designed a system that won't even let you break the glass,
Yeah.
right? Like it's just there.
Which I like. I really like, because honestly,
amazing.
it makes it easier, especially as the business grows, because I don't make all the decisions, obviously.
Right.
And no one does. Like, the business grows, it gets bigger, people are making decisions in a local way.
Yeah.
Everyone understands, though, this constraint here at Unchained. They know that, like, well, we can never do this. We can never, expose our clients to risk in this way, because we took away that ability from ourselves.
Right.
And I think organizationally, it just means that a lot of conversations that would start at other firms just don't even get started here.
Right.
Because it's like, it won't work. So why talk about it? Let's figure out a different solution.
Yeah.
Right. And I like that about us.
Yeah, that's an interesting mechanism for more creative problem solving as well. Because if you were to jump in and take like the historical approach that other firms would have done, or the easy way out, as we're discussing, then you probably just get wrecked. Is what would end up happening. And so that's a good segue for like everything that's going on. By the way, I think hours before we started recording, BlockFi filed for bankruptcy.
Ouch.
Yeah. So like we're watching all these dominoes fall. Is everything that you just outlined there the reason why Unchained is successful versus what they're doing? Did they reach for the easy option at the very beginning instead of building out?
I think it's a big part of it.
Okay.
I think the people here are a huge part of it, like the shared vision that we have, like that we all have a mission that we're on. We're trying to build something that is valuable to us ourselves. Like, a lot of Unchained employees are users of our product.
Yeah.
Or our family members and friends are users of the product. So I think we all have a lot of skin in the game here.
Yeah.
I will say it is strange in an awesome way to work at a company where people actually believe in the mission statement.
Yeah.
I think most companies, that's just not, you have some, whatever it is,
Yeah.
It's on a t-shirt. You're like, maybe you like the t-shirts because it's comfy, but like, you don't really believe the words.
Yeah.
Some companies do. Like, I've definitely, here in Austin, there's a few great education companies who they're really focused on the mission of like empowering people to learn better. And I think like, I've seen in that vertical, I've seen true belief and how it can drive like a great corporate culture. Occasionally I've seen it in some other places, but even in tech, in like databases, and the problem becomes that so much of your actual work becomes like servicing, the needs of a company to like grow its bottom line and so on. And it can be really easy to, for that mission to lose its to lose its value, especially for the 100th or the 1,000th employee that joins the business, right?
Sure.
Maybe the first 10 people really are passionate about revitalizing healthcare solutions or something for the enterprise. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to sound like I'm dismissing whole businesses here, but it does kind of sound that way. Unchained has been cool because everybody here really likes Bitcoin, really loves our choices, the constraints that we've put ourselves under to build products the right way. And it's really powerful. So I think that's a huge part of our success. But I do agree ultimately that adopting the constraint that we're going to be collaborative custody, multisig, on-chain, cold storage, align our interests with our clients, therefore make it so easy for them to leave that we have to do such a good job with our product and service that they just want to stay, right? That has been a huge part of it too. And I'm proud of us because it's hard to do it that way. It's made BlockFi filed bankruptcy, but they grew a lot faster than we did too.
Yeah, they do.
They started after us, grew a lot faster than us, have a lot of the same products, and are now bankrupt. And I don't draw joy from that, but I definitely draw a lesson. And I'm like, thank God I didn't make those choices.
Right.
Because I could have felt the same pressures to grow, to raise, to spend VC money on client acquisition, to Ponzi your way up the ladder until it becomes sustainable. Those weren't options for us because our product is much more technically sophisticated. It's a niche product in many ways for Bitcoiners who are a niche within a niche. So it's kept us honest. But I also think because we're right, because I think we're right, this is how financial services are going to be delivered broad scale, decades from now. We're in an incredibly enviable position. I've used this analogy before, but maybe I'll trot it out here. I often think I kind of hate Bitcoin internet comparisons, but this is kind of one of them. I'm old enough to remember Yahoo as the brand associated with the internet. And Yahoo got its start before Google, famously one of the huge early big IPOs of .com era. And the killer app of the internet is search. We know that now. At the time it was sort of understood, and that was kind of the problem that Yahoo solved, right? There were this directory. You go to Yahoo, you browse through what you're looking for, funny shit, directions, information, and it would be curated, right? So it was this approach to search that involved human curation. The librarian's approach to organizing information almost, right? Unsurprisingly, a traditionalist solution to the problem of search on the internet. And it was a huge company, right? Because it was an important problem to solve. Google, of course, is how we do search now. And importantly, Google didn't use that traditional model, right? They forced themselves to take the internet on its own terms. And they came up with a solution that actually scaled with the size of the internet. Because of course, human creation is a great way to index, or a directory is a great way to index a small amount of information. Because experts can go through it all and they can really make it easy to navigate. But the internet grows faster than any finite team of people can index or categorize it. So they needed a machine learning algorithm, right? They needed a horizontal machine learning. That is the core of the internet today, is horizontally applied machine learning algorithms at scale on data, i.e. distributed databases, the kind of thing that I did in my prior business. That's the entire internet runs that way.
Sure.
So Google basically invented the core computation model for the entire modern age in solving the search problem. And of course, it was better and it was rougher in some ways, maybe when it got started, but it eventually became a far better solution for how to do search online. And everyone realized that. And of course, now everyone uses Google and so on. So it's partly a story of how understanding the problem domain can help you find the right solution. But I think the other part of the story is that Google was really good about viewing this thing that they learned as an important constraint on their business. So famously at Google, all things that engineers would build had to be the same kind of thing. They had to be horizontally scalable, machine learning driven, data driven, horizontal applications. This is really cool because it meant Google invented so much of the stack, and because they sort of forced themselves to this is how we at Google make computations. We write MapReduce, and that's a technical statement, but all the technology that my business was selling 10 years ago was technology that Google invented 20 years ago.
Gotcha.
And the reason they had to invent it is because they embraced the constraint of this is the only way we compute. This is how we build applications for the internet age. And so they got really, really good at it. And it powered their growth past search, like into, if you recall, Gmail was like a revolutionary product when it came out.
Sure.
Because of the work that Google did, like their approach to spam, like so much, like maps, like so much of what the value that they accrued came from reapplying this model of horizontal computing to larger and larger and larger volumes of data, which to build services, which would then bring in even more data to build even more valuable services. So embracing this constraint really led them to find like the sort of golden path to value on the internet, right?
Yep.
And I think you can tell the same story about Amazon, but in a slightly different way. I really want Unchained to follow that same model. Not that I want us to be a big tech company or anything like that necessarily, but I want us to, because I think we found the important constraint here,
Yep.
is that you like coordination in Bitcoin, in a Bitcoin denominated economy, happens through multisig, it happens through collaborative custody, it happens on the chain, and in other places, other loci where keys are put together. Like keys are important for driving services in a Bitcoin world. We've embraced that constraint. We're building products with it. We're years ahead of our market. Anyone else thinking this way. And I'm hoping that like Google or Amazon or other companies that understood well the importance of essential constraint in a growing new disruptive ecosystem, like we're just going to be surfing that wave out in front of everybody. We'll be taking our ethos of product development and the way we treat clients and the way we build services into whole new verticals and domains. Like we're increasingly becoming a bank right now, and that's where we are. That's our center. But I see us branching out into so many other areas as Bitcoin, grows itself to disrupt those areas as well.
Yeah.
At least that's the vision.
Yeah. Now, and this is just me being, I guess, one of those guys and poking holes and stuff. But like, so how does one defend against turning into the Google, if that makes sense, right? Because there's that whole, they're up, and then what the hell happened? Now you guys are surveillance, or now whatever analogy you want to put there, or description of them. So how do you defend if you're going along that same path, right? And you're scaling that path. Is it Bitcoin that protects us from that at all? Because we have to be honest at all points in time, or is it just ethical decisions? What's your opinion on that?
It's a lot. I won't speak to, maybe I can say two things about at least the way I perceive changes in Google as a company, as well as changes in the public perception of Google. Like one change is probably just the loss of leadership.
Okay.
Like this is true of a lot of businesses. Like early leaders leave, like the business grows and wins and succeeds and people get paid and they walk out of there and a whole new culture eventually takes over. I mean, Google's a 20 or 30-year-old company at this point. And that meaningfully changes culture. So I think part of my goals here would be, how can I ensure that we're building a business that 30 years from now you still want to work at?
Right.
And it can't be because you're just doing the same thing. Like you can't be in a rut. We have to continuously be growing our reach in order to keep early folks here and keep them interested and excited, right? We always have to, at some point, being able to make more money is not going to motivate anybody here.
Right.
We have to be able to say it's the impact that we have. Like look at the changes we're driving in the world around us. Like, don't you want to be part of this? So I feel like that's part of the solution. I also feel like this is a little bit glib, but Google was famous for like, this is a little bit glib, but like Google was famous, right, for don't be evil.
Yes.
And I think others have said this, but really can't be evil be better, right?
Yeah.
And I think I'd love to embrace that here at Unchained, and to a degree we have with our key-based model. Like if you're a client of Unchained's products and you feel like you have a vault, for example, and you don't like the way you were treated, you don't like the way Unchained is treating other people, like whether it's because you want to cancel us or whether you just don't feel safe with us or whether you just feel like we're not a good company to bank with, walk out the door.
Yeah.
We can't stop you. You have the keys. We've taught you how to use them. We've published open source software for you to use. So even if our application is offline or we try to prevent you, we can't. This changes everything about the way that we approach our clients.
Yeah.
It's not our money, it's theirs.
I think that baffles people.
It is. I think we've consistently received advice from investors and partners being like, don't do that, guys. Y'all know that's not how you build banks, right?
Yeah.
But I'm like, maybe it can be. Maybe a bank needs to be constrained in this way.
Transparency. To
be a value-added custodian, to always have to focus on what value they're adding instead of becoming, I don't know, a little big-headed with the idea that they control your money and they're preventing you from doing things. Can't be evil is hard to engineer into everything.
Right.
But I think if it's at the core of a lot of the important products that you are enabling it, and it's a philosophy of your product design, maybe it's a tool to keep the company honest over a multi-decade time frame, over longer than the time frame that any founder or leader, early employee or whatever can still have voice. I mean, companies change, people grow, and generations come in and out. Like, how do you maintain that culture? Well, build it into the product, right?
Yeah.
Build it into the constraint that you have between your business and your clients.
Yeah. Makes a ton of sense. Yeah. I'm gonna, and this is sort of related to that and just honesty, transparency, and all that. But I've always wondered your take on this. So we all know Bitcoin brings the best out of people. Well,
Sometimes.
Yeah. Good point. Sorry, BlockFi. But like, the people that, me personally in my own life, I'll speak for, right? So like, since the introduction to Bitcoin, if sovereign is the loose word to use here, more sovereign, more focused on ownership of health, of all these things, of money, of resources, that all happened because of Bitcoin. It could have happened outside of Bitcoin, but in a much more slow, gradual way. A lot of my peers that I've met and I've talked to as well have had the same similar experience where it's like, they call it, orange pilling, whatever it is. You just go down this like, there's this path of just like sovereignty of ownership. So I talked to Gigi about this months ago. He had like a long-winded 3-piece answer to this, but I'm interested, you yourself, what is it about the properties of Bitcoin that brings out honesty, that brings out truth and the best in people for the most part? Let's not generalize everything.
Maybe it's an extension of what we're talking about, where like the idea that we're all in this voluntarily, and that there's a community here. It's not a company or a nation state or a religion or political party. It's a shared enterprise, right? Like we're all going to make it, as a wonderful phrase, right? For that reason. I'll offer maybe I don't know about strange, but like my own take on some of the independence and self-reliance aspects is like, I don't know that Bitcoin has had that effect on me. I definitely hear a lot of people speak to that.
Yeah.
And I'm excited that it has had that effect on them. I think I've almost experienced maybe more of an opposite effect, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Like, I think I've always been a really self-reliant person, like to a fault. I've always been the kind of person to hold my cards very close to my chest. I can be pretty gregarious, but I'm actually like a huge introvert. I don't have a lot of close friends. I'm like deeply focused on like my family and the small number of people that like kind of reach my inner circle. I'm shy. I'm not super confident a lot of the times, perhaps externally, but like I'm deeply confident in myself and my abilities. And I always have been. I've had to rely on myself a lot in my life. Growing up, all sorts of ways. Being an entrepreneur also, I think, drives that in you. You sort of learn that you have to do things on your own, that you're responsible for building a whole business. You become responsible for people's salaries, for delivering things that you said you would. And you can't blame your boss because you're a co-founder and you helped start the business. So I think I always had a pretty radical sense of ownership in this way. Something I think I've been really not great at is because I think I've so much relied on myself and I'm such an introvert and always looking inward and trying to focus and build. I think I tend to be dismissive or I don't appreciate enough sometimes community and that we're all working on something together.
Yeah.
Within a business, I think I've managed it. Like our employees are all pulling in the same direction. I can get behind, but it's always us against our competitors or us against or trying to sell to this client. So we're like, we're trying to help this part of the client, but we don't like this team at the client, right? So we're trying to get around them, right? There's an adversarial sense to work sometimes in that sense, or of your team trying to win and outcompete other teams and things like this. I think what Bitcoin has really helped me to kind of fall into more is the notion that this is like probably one of the first communities that I actually feel like proud and okay proclaiming my membership in.
Yeah.
And I think it comes back to kind of what you say that like because I there is obviously a degree to which Bitcoiners, like any other community, many of us can just be cheerleaders, or we're just tribalists, or we're just rah shaking the banner, this kind of thing. But I think so many of us, and I've been so impressed by this, really do want the same things, and we're working towards it. And it really is this sense of community, like responsibility to like educate about Bitcoin, to like dispel myths about it, to help bring new people and shepherd them into using it correctly and avoiding scams. And I'm trying to build products that are in service of Bitcoin and to extend it to make it more useful, to not screw people over and give them a bad experience. Like there's there's obviously a community of people building distributed databases. There's a community of people in other areas of technology and finance. But this feels like a community that I want to join.
Right.
So suddenly I'm like I'm really so excited. Like we're having this interview here in the Bitcoin Commons. Like it's so cool that we even have such a concept here that Unchained can be part of that. I'm like deeply proud that like I get to be part of that community. So I think for me, Bitcoin has kind of been a lesson in not being such a weird loner. You know, realize that other people want what you want and like are talented and pulling in the same direction. And they don't have to be working at your company. They don't have to be your clients. They could just be random people on Twitter that are pulling and educating and pushing in the same direction as you are. I would actually say that it wasn't until I got interested in Bitcoin deeply that Twitter became interesting to me.
Yeah, same here.
You know, maybe you see that. Because before I was like, this is just all random people. Just I don't care about any of these people. You know what I mean? Like nothing interesting is happening here.
Yeah.
And of course, it takes falling into community and realizing that Twitter can be a channel for that community where you learn about the community, you learn about what's happening in the community and the progress people are making and the concerns that people have and the questions. I love being able to tweet a question that I don't know the answer to, like some technical thing. And within 20 minutes, like probably one of the best people in the world has been like, oh, I think this is the answer. Or like, here's a link where I solved this problem for you. Like, that being part of a community like that feels really good.
Yeah.
So for me, Bitcoin has kind of been, as I say, a lesson in like how to join something for the first time in my life, something that I can join that I don't feel like in the Mark Twain quote or whatever, right? Where like, I don't feel like, really, like, am I joining this? Like, am I just trying to be like everybody else? It's like, no, dude, this is the thing to join. If there's anything to join, this is the thing to join. This is the t-shirt to wear.
Yeah.
This is the thing to vote for. This is the thing to throw your money behind, to donate to build within. Like, it's cool. I like that.
Yeah, it's that new, I feel this way sometimes where it's like in fiat land, as I like to call it, it's kind of seemed like all those designations have already been accounted for, right? So you have like the high-end Googles of the world, you have all that. And then this, it's still so early that it's like we can actually put, our talents, our skills, our, what we can contribute into display and actually get appreciated for it, if that makes any sense. And that's been super important for me. To swing back to the earlier in the conversation where you said, the most important part of Bitcoin is money, the money aspect of it. How does that correlate with the community aspect? Is it like, because I like to think that it's not about money, it's about community, but obviously there's a super importance to the money aspect of why everybody's related to that. Why is that?
We'll bring it back to community maybe in a second, but I think for me, like when I first realized how important the money part was just actually starting to build Bitcoin applications. Yeah. And maybe this is something that's obvious to you, like you're pretty much an expert at this point compared to most people, as am I, but like, as probably are most people listening to this, I'm going to guess. But the notion that Bitcoin has a test net, like this is not something that I think most people know.
Right.
Like they don't realize that the test net is exactly the same as Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not even like, gold versus iron pyrite. It's like, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
The only difference is some label in the Genesis block. Oh, and by the way, one of them is worth, 15, 16 grand. The other is worth nothing. And the third difference, testnet doesn't work. And like, if you use testnet for developing applications, it does not have the properties of Bitcoin mainnet. It does not have regularly spaced blocks. It's not as reliable. It has all sorts of crazy behavior. It just doesn't work as well as a network. And when I started to see that, I was like, well, why not? It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's not, because this one doesn't worth anything, right? So if it's not worth anything, people don't act the same way. If they don't act the same way, then it doesn't have the same properties as a result. So I was like deeply like, oh my God, the money really matters, right? Same thing with Ethereum. Ethereum actually has this wonderful phrase of proof of authority, right? Which is one of their test nets, because test nets suck. Because they don't have the economic incentives, they don't fucking work. And so they built a test net, which is like different than the consensus model on this test net is proof of authority. Basically, a fixed set of servers choose the blocks. There are other models that they have for other test nets in Ethereum as well now too, but I thought this was a cool idea because it's like, actually, that's what you want from testnet, because it's just for testing. It doesn't have to be worth anything. You just want a list of people who are reliable to just make the testnet block so it always works. And then you can test 90% of what you need to test in that kind of a model. But doesn't that reveal how important the money is, right? Yeah. It's like, it really does.
Yeah.
And I think thinking about that really got me like less on, like, it helped walk me away from like, oh, money doesn't matter. The tokens are, tokens can be for anything. Even maybe the tokens don't matter. It's just all the blockchain. I know I've spoken with people who really do believe that like Bitcoin would be better if there weren't a money aspect to it, if it was just the blockchain somehow. And I'm like, bro, you don't know how it works then, clearly, because like it wouldn't work without the money. Like it would become testnet and it would fail.
Yeah.
So I feel like that early on that helped me understand like how important the money part is. And then also thinking about application development. Sort of at some point I realized like people are writing all this code on Ethereum, they're building all these applications, but like you could crush the entire Ethereum network with like $100,000 of, fee bloat.
Right,
Like all the applications would grind to a halt because they can't get, basically the idea that monetary so this would be an attack vector that I'm describing. Like if you wanted to, you could just take out the Ethereum network by spending or all of the application layer of the Ethereum network just by putting in high value transactions with lots of fees, right? It wouldn't cost you that much to sort of perform this like idea of an economic denial of service, right? If you're willing to throw a few millions of dollars at it, like maybe the numbers have changed now. These networks have grown a lot larger, but it struck me that like it's money which protects the functioning of these applications, right? And helps them go. Also, we know that just in general, applications in altcoin lands where they try to compute everything in the blockchain, they do tend to grind to a halt at periods of high usage, right? When fees go up, those applications become very unstable and difficult to use because they're relying on doing all their computations within this blockchain. But then the idea, basically illustrating the idea that like application use cases and other things will get priced out by the most economically valuable transactions. Those are the ones which will actually because the blockchain is ultimately a market, those are the transactions which will actually settle. So at the end of the day, like I was like, man, all of this is pointing to a really important concept, which is like the money is central here. And then of course, I'm saying all this because I'm a computer guy ultimately, but like learning from Parker and a lot of the other folks that I've now interacted with in the last few years and seeing how their perspective is so centered in like the macro picture and like how the money needs to change. And I'm like, okay, so that is just as important for those reasons, like sort of philosophically, mission-wise, as it is just technically implementation-wise. Like it all centers around the fact that this is a better form of money.
Yeah.
And a valuable form of money, one that will therefore incentivize human beings to do the needful thing in this distributed system that no one is in charge of, right?
Right.
Once you have that like full circle of thoughts, you kind of become like, the money has to be really good. Like the better money will win. It'll build a more powerful network. The incentives will be stronger. It's a better foundation to build everything else upon. And you sort of like start to zone in pretty hard on the idea of, I don't want any properties which ruin the monetary properties. Like the monetary properties are primal above all other properties the system could have.
Yeah. Now, well, you literally just spun me away from where. So a few weeks ago, I had a conversation with somebody here at Unchained, and I like what I like to call the GG of Bitcoin, right? Like I like the philosophy aspects of Bitcoin.
Sure.
So what I was telling this person was like, to me personally, I think on my stack on the reasons why I have Bitcoin, money is the last reason. And what that person's argument is it can't be. It has to be your number one reason.
Do you mean money or mean like your personal wealth?
Money.
Okay.
That piece of it.
Okay.
That's a good point. I didn't think about it in the other hand. But yeah, like to me, like what I've gotten out of Bitcoin when it comes to community, right? Similar to yourself, very introverted, very careful about who I'm around, that same thing. What I've gotten out of Bitcoin, the relationships I've gotten, the sovereign mindset, all that came with it. And the last thing that I thought about is like, this is going to make me really rich one day.
Probably, yeah.
Right.
I hope so too.
Yeah, right. So like, that's what I was trying to explain to this person. I was like, hey, I'm glad that like, your cost basis at what you pick up Bitcoin and what it's going to be in 2 years is important to you. But to me, from everything that I've gotten from Bitcoin, including the position here at Unchained, right? Like all the stuff that I really care about, I don't really think about money. I don't think about the price.
I would agree with that. I think I'm probably the same camp as you, which is like, I'm pretty sure that if I just keep holding my Bitcoin for another decade or two, like I will singularly, just that one thing will make me a very wealthy person.
Yeah.
That's cool. I'm like excited about that.
Yeah.
It's not the thing I'm finding most valuable.
Okay.
Like, not to toot my own horn. I'm pretty sure I would be fine even without Bitcoin, no matter what. Like I'm smart, I'm hardworking, I'm talented, like I have great connections, I'm very lucky. Like I would find careers, I would find a path, it would be fine. So like I sort of operate in the context of like, I am a successful person. I will become more successful no matter what. Like, so the idea of like having wealth through Bitcoin is exciting, but it's as you say, it's not the thing I find most valuable, right? The thing I find most valuable is the changes I'm seeing in myself as a result of feeling like I'm part of a community on a mission together to build something really valuable, and just how cool and impactful that feels.
Indeed. Yeah.
I've said this before, but I sometimes feel like one day Unchained, like because we're going to grow to be such a larger company even than we are today, we're going to be deeply connected to like important financial flows of the world. We'll be a structurally important business in the world. I hope one day us. Like, I think that means I'll get to be somewhere and be in a room meeting. So there'll be a conversation where I'm like, man, I can't believe I even get to be in this room right now.
Yeah.
Like, and it won't be because I have some amount of money in Bitcoin.
Right.
It'll be because I helped build Unchained.
Yeah.
And that's what got me into that room. And that feels really cool.
Yeah. I think I've already experienced that, Drew,
Yeah.
a bunch of times. I'm sure it'll come even more, but like I talk to my wife all the time, right? So, hard upbringings, people that listen to this podcast knows a little bit about my background and stuff. And then sometimes I just pinch myself and I'm like, hey, like my desk is overlooking 6 in Congress and I'm working for the premier Bitcoin company in the space. Like that's magical to me, right? Like if I were to, you ask me maybe even 2 years ago, and I was in an operating room ready to get forced vaccinated because I needed to make income, right? Like it was like, oh, well, I either get this forced vaccination upcoming in November, as this email has highlighted for me, or I have to figure out another way to make money, right? And I was ready to go figure out the other way. And then, Bitcoin and then Unchained, that whole intertwined thing. And then here I am having this conversation with you. So like, I've already felt that experience of like, how did I get into this room? What am I doing in this room? And just trying to be grateful and continue that to happen.
Yeah, being in the room is what's valuable. It's like, it's cool that you might be wealthy in some real terms with Bitcoin one day, but like being in the room is what's valuable.
Yeah, I think, and back to like that whole bottom of the stack, I consider myself wealthy, whether, like a number would say.
Yeah, what does the guy really need? Yeah.
Yeah, very, low time preference, very basic needs. I mean, married, got beautiful kids, like I'm happy, right? So like, that's going to circle back. That's what I was trying to tell this person was like, hey man, I don't look at price. And it's not because of some like cool little like stand that I took where I don't have to look at price. It's legit. Like what Bitcoin has given me is far more than any wealth I could ever receive because it's gotten me here in this room talking to you and being around peers that I actually love and enjoy being around, right? Like that's, how many people listening to this can say, hey, I love going into work and love my peers. That's very rare. Yeah. So, all right, Dhruv, we're reaching the hour here. What's next? If you can say for you, and then conversely for Unchained, you think, let's say 5 years. Let's give it a 5-year window.
Wow, 5 years. That's like forever away.
Yeah. We drop it down next year.
so we're, I mean, it's just in the spirit of brainstorming, which I think that you're asking the question.
Yep.
I definitely see the last 5 years, Unchained's been around for, I think, 6 years now officially.
Yep.
It's been obviously a period of huge building and growth for me. I feel like I've discovered Twitter, Bitcoin, like I've written some pretty cool articles that like really pushed my own understanding and ability. I've built stuff here at Unchained that I'm deeply proud of, both like as a business, but also on the technology side. Like I think some of the hardest technical lifts that I've ever done as an engineer have happened here in the last year or two. It's hard to change code of a running bank that has to work all the time and can't make mistakes, and to land it smoothly. It's hard. And I'm proud of myself and the team for doing those things. So I feel like I've done some of my best work ever here. Next 5 years have only got to be better.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm like, how's that going to work?
Yeah.
I'm already feeling like pretty tops here. And I think the answer has got to be Unchained. We've unlocked a really valuable market segment. As you know, like our clients love us. I think our product is the best product in the market. We have the right business model for the future of financial services in a Bitcoinized world. But we're not the company we need to be yet. We need more revenue, more clients. We need to be able to control our future more. Bitcoin is extremely cyclic. It's been hard on us, just as it's been hard on so many other companies. And we're not even making some of the bad decisions those companies made. And it's still hard on us. Like the market has tanked by 80% this year, affects our bottom line. If we're going to survive to do all the big idea things that I would like us to do, we got to build a real business here. And we're getting close. I think the scale that we've achieved now is a great basis upon which to build that business. But that's part of just scaling too, is we're kind of coming out of that finding product market fit and establishing the initial product mix. It's monetization, optimization, automation, all the things that that we're working on all the time here at Unchained. So I feel like this is honestly in many ways harder for me than the last 5 years. I think I'm very naturally gravitate towards building new stuff. And I think I am learning with many colleagues here how to bring in staff to help grow the stuff that already works, right? To optimize it.
Yep.
So that's going to be a big part of my own personal growth. It's just, as a founder, I've never built a business as big as Unchained before. This is the best I've ever done. And so I feel like I'm kind of reaching some of my own limits in terms of things that I'm comfortable with or know about. And I'm having to like really up level in terms of myself and my skill set and where I try to set my thoughts. It can be really tempting. I've written a lot of code here. I still know a lot of details. It can be really tempting to lose yourself in the details every day. There's always something going on. Oh, some bug here, something here, and it's tempting because I'm good at it too, right? So I'm good at the code. I'm good at digging into the problem, figuring it out. I could spend all day, every day, adding small bits of incremental value like that, but I'd lose myself. Right. I need to rely on the team that we've built to do that work now. And I need to go find new areas to push in. And we'd even had a conversation about this before I came on the show today. I've got some new content that I'm really excited about. It's been stuff that I've been building up for years. All sorts of different threads, everything from thermodynamics to Bitcoin history to math and all sorts of fun stuff. But I feel like I need to get some of this content out. Yeah. I really enjoy writing, but it's literally the hardest thing for me. Yeah. I'm so much faster and quicker at producing code than I am at producing words. Yeah. Despite taking forever to say anything, producing good words on paper is real fucking hard. Challenging. But it's also very satisfying. My wife is a professional writer, so she's ostensibly better than me at this. Yeah. But she talks about how a lot of writers don't like writing; they like having written, and I totally get that because I'm like, man, I just want to finish this article so it can be done and people can read it and I can be like happy with it and like I don't want to go through the writing of the article part. Like that's like the daunting. The threads don't quite line up. Like it's getting longer and longer, and you're like, "Ooh, where's this article going?" Like I gotta skinny it down, Right. I'm kind of I'm in that phase for a bunch of content projects of mine. I'm a little frustrated with myself. I need to find some like airspace in the day so I can like kind of land some of those projects. And I'll be excited when I am done with them because then I will have written. Yeah. And then you'll be coming back on to talk about it. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, we got to talk about it. Yeah, definitely do. Words that no one talks about are not words. Yeah. Well, looking forward to it. I know we'll even tackle the Bitcoin and Mars and that whole series of articles. I'm glad. We'll cover it for next time. Yeah, definitely. We'll have a whole episode just on your writings because it is fascinating. Above my head, but in a good way. It makes me want to think up instead of just being like most of the content nowadays where it's like sleep, snore. So Dhruv, I appreciate everything you do. I appreciate what you've done here at Unchained. It's a big part of why I'm so comfortable where I'm at in life right now. And personally telling you that's important to me, that a big piece of my life right now is Unchained and it's happiness. It's right there with you, brother. It's such a great feeling. So I appreciate you. Thanks for coming on and we'll set up a round two. All right. Folks, you know where to get all the content. Podcasting 2.0 is what we're trying to do here. Breeze, Zeus, there's a few of them out there. I'm blanking on them. But the Breeze and Fountain are our favorite way to go. Stream us some sats, show us some value. This show will never have ads. This show will never have sponsors. We're trying to get into the Bitcoin standard of media, and Lightning allows us to do that. If you want to check out this 4K content, then Bitcoin TV is the place to go. Let's get away from those algorithms. If you're not on the Bitcoin standard of content yet, I don't know what you're waiting for, but you can go tickle the algorithm, rate, share, subscribe on YouTube and all those other places, and that'll help us get some signal up. And then eventually you can come over to the Bitcoin standard of content. Appreciate y'all as always. I'll catch y'all next week. Later.